to turn it over your shoulder to you with them.
Good morning, everyone who's joining us now. We'll get started in just a moment. We are going to be talking about workforce issues, and we're also joined by U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you. I am back in Washington. I'm particularly pleased to be joined by Dante Bartolomeo, and really welcome the opportunity to talk again about what the federal government is doing to try to turn the tide on this insidious disease and reopen the economy.
Senator, let me just let a few more people get in. We're just gonna, they're just starting to register in. Then we'll get started. All right, again, thank you everyone for joining us. Our webinar today is workforce issues during the coronavirus crisis. Our sponsor is AMS Recruiting, sponsors of today's webinar, and they focus on temporary and direct hiring in healthcare, manufacturing, law, and finance roles. As always, I also want to thank all of our investors in the chamber who support us, allow us to do the things that we're able to do right now, supporting the business community, putting on webinars like this one to try to inform you as to the different issues that are out there and impacting your business. So again, thank you to all of our investors. And we are very pleased to have a great panel with us again this morning. We have Dante Bartolomeo, who is the Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Labor. And I know I did not do a good job there, Dante, but I'll let you correct that. And Bill Villano with Workforce Alliance, and of course, U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal to start us off. So the way we're going to run this today is we're going to have the Senator speak for a few moments, and then we will take a few questions and answers with the Senator. You can put those into the Q&A or into our chat box, and then we'll go on to the rest of our panel. So Senator, please start us off.
Thanks so much, Garrett. Thanks to you and to the New Haven Chamber and to all of you who are joining the call, particularly to my really good friend, Dante Bartolomeo, and to so many people who do so much for our community. I'll give you a brief update on programs that I think may be of interest to you. I am back in Washington. Last time I joined you, I was in Connecticut, but we're here for this week. I wish we were doing more, to be honest with you, about a phase 4 relief program, because more investment in the kind of work that Dante and other dedicated state officials are doing, led by Governor Lamont, is absolutely necessary. You know, we devoted about $150 billion out of $2.2 trillion in the COVID-3 relief package to aid state and local government. One of my main priorities coming back now is more money. I think it's going to be more than the $500 billion that the National Governors Association has said is necessary. I think it's more like $1 trillion to fund the work of our state and local governments in the midst of their deficits and budget crises that are ongoing right now as we speak. So that's one of my priorities coming back. The Paycheck Protection Program. Just saw the recent figures that about 30,000 more Connecticut businesses have borrowed about $2.1 billion through the SBA backstopped program involving loans going to small businesses, less than 500 employees, loans that can be forgiven if those businesses keep employees on their payrolls. We have been working, fighting, advocating for many of those small businesses from our last conversation, even before. As you all know, there were problems with many of the bigger customers favored by the bigger banks. I think we helped to solve that in the second batch of funding devoted to the program, $310 billion added to the $359 billion in the first tranche, and $60 billion more for small lenders, which typically make loans to smaller businesses. So I'm hearing from a lot of businesses now that we have helped literally tens, maybe hundreds of businesses that have now received those loans. But we are still working, and I still want to hear from you if you feel that you have been denied unjustly a loan under the Paycheck Protection Program. I'm going to give my cell phone number again because, frankly, it was so productive and valuable to hear from you, many of you, before. My cell phone number, 202-641-0532. That's 202-641-0532. And I'll try to give it again before we leave this conference. But that program seems to be moving along. There are still issues relating to the uses of loans by businesses that have not yet opened. We need some more flexibility because a lot of the restaurants, for example, won't open until the end of this month. And the 2 months of the loan are meanwhile ongoing, and we have perhaps some workarounds for the program, but we're working with the SBA on possible additional flexibility. The unemployment insurance issue seems to be resolved at least part way by the State Department of Labor. The portal for sole proprietors and for contractors and business owners seems to be working better than it was, and a real tribute to the state officials who are making it happen, updating a somewhat slow computer system and program that they have managed to update very quickly. But down here, what I see is a need for continued aid for small business, expanding that PPP program, more aid for state and local business, a HEROES fund to provide premium pay for the police and fire and frontline healthcare workers and the folks who work in grocery, Red Cross workers who are risking their lives. This HEROES fund would provide premium pay to reward, but also retain and recruit these frontline workers as we continue in the midst of this healthcare crisis. And we are unlikely to see, in my view, a complete reopening of the economy until we turn the tide on the disease itself. And so continued aid for the hospitals and testing equipment that are needed by those frontline healthcare workers, personal protective equipment. And I will say Yale New Haven has been a leader in this effort. The hospital system run by Yale New Haven all around the state has done absolutely magnificent work, but they are hurting financially. Some of our hospitals are on the precipice of financial disaster. So I am going to be fighting down here for another tranche of aid to the hospitals, which are necessary in this time of continued crisis. And I'll just finish on this note. Testing, contact tracing are key. We need more tests. We need more of that protective gear. We're not going to reopen the economy until people feel safe about going back to the malls, the restaurants, the workplaces, the schools. And the great danger is, in light of these recent projected doubling or increases in the numbers of deaths, that people will feel insecure rather than safe. And that's why leadership is so important. And the healthcare issues that confront us are critical to the economic progress that we need to make. So thanks to all of you. I really want to hear from you. Your comments have been enormously valuable. Again, 202-641-0532. Small business is really one of our priorities here. You are the backbone of our economy. You're the job creators, and you're the ones who are going to reopen our economy, frankly, and put people back to work. So thanks for all your great work. And I'd be happy to answer any questions folks may have about what we're doing here this week, what we will do in the next relief program, COVID-4, as we call it. But thanks for giving me this opportunity to be with you today and with Dante.
Thanks, Senator. Appreciate it. And first question on the Paycheck Protection Program. It does seem to be running smoother now and more small businesses taking advantage. Do you anticipate, though, if that fund does run out in the next week or so, that there will be more dollars there. I think a big issue has been panic among business owners that they are not going to be able to take advantage of it.
What I can tell you is that it is enormously popular. The last package, what we call COVID 3.5, with the approximately $380 billion to replenish the program, passed unanimously. So I would anticipate, yes, there will be another tranche of funding. I will certainly work for it. I want to add a note here. I have proposed a program called the Paycheck Security Program with three of my colleagues, Senator Warner of Virginia, Senator Sanders of Vermont, and Senator Doug Jones of Alabama. For those of you familiar with the ideological range of the Democratic Party, Senator Sanders is obviously on the left. Senator Doug Jones, a Democrat from Alabama, is more to the right. Senator Warner and I are sort of centrist moderates. So we span the Democratic Party. On the Republican side, there is also a proposal very similar, not identical, but very similar, from Senator Hawley, Republican of Missouri, and a number of his colleagues. And essentially what we would do is provide a long-term, reliable guarantee of payroll, up to $90,000 guaranteed till the end of this crisis, without the need to renew these programs, without the inflexibility of when do we open, how do we convert the loan to a grant. Let's just pay the payrolls of companies whenever they bring people back on their payrolls, and do that through the end of the crisis, and do it for businesses that suffer 20% losses in revenue month over month, so that frankly we avoid giving a lot of money to companies, and I don't mean any disrespect here, but companies that are in effect doing just fine, as opposed to the companies who are really in need and hurting and want to put people back on their payroll or keep people on their payrolls. That's the goal as well. And so I don't mean to divert from the practical and realistic need that we have. I anticipate that the PPP program will be replenished if and when, as apparently already has happened, it's run out of money. But fortunately, I think it's now probably close to 50,000 Connecticut businesses have received some PPP funding.
This is kind of related, and maybe this addresses it a little bit. And I've heard this from a lot of employers. There's a question already on there about it, that employees who are on unemployment right now with the $600 extra stimulus dollars may not necessarily want to return to work right now. A few reasons, maybe health related. Also maybe that they're making more on unemployment. Is there any way to address that? At first, when I first started hearing about this, I wasn't sure if that was, if we'd really see that, but it has come up with more and more employers that they're having trouble getting employees back to work, and I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, Garrett, I think we talked about this issue, and it is an important issue, in our last conversation. First, just to put it somewhat starkly and maybe a little bit brutally, if anybody on this call asks an employee to come back to work, and that employee says, oh, I'd rather be at home, I'd rather collect unemployment insurance, all that employer has to do is call the Department of Labor, and that person is going to be off unemployment insurance and potentially liable legally if he or she has lied to the Department of Labor, because there is an obligation to come back to work if your job is reopened. That's always been the law. Whatever the level of unemployment insurance, anybody who wants to stay home rather than take a job when it is offered again, come back to your old job, is cut from unemployment insurance. But also, that employee should know, if there's ever a need really to use unemployment insurance, he or she is using up that opportunity, because you only get it for 4 months, that $600 addition on top of the normal amount. And finally, my hope is I know you may have heard anecdotally that some people want to stay at home, but I think the vast majority, tell me if I'm wrong, really want to come back to work. As much as they may have enjoyed being at home for a week, maybe 10 days, what I find is that people are really eager to work. Most people want to work. And I have that basic trust. It may sound naive, but I have a certain amount of trust in our Connecticut workforce. We have one of the great workforces in the United States, and I see it in the defense contractor supply chain, where people have been working throughout this crisis at places like Pratt and Electric Boat, many of their suppliers, Sikorsky, all across the state. Folks have continued to work. They've continued on the job despite the health threat that many of them have, because they know their work is essential. And that goes for the folks at the checkout counter at grocery stores, for the Red Cross employees, obviously for the frontline workers. We can never give too many shout outs to the docs and the nurses and the folks washing the floors and emptying literally the trash at those hospitals, where they are really putting their lives on the line. And I think, again, my hope is that this problem will take care of itself and our economy will reopen and people will come back to work.
Last question on the testing. I know in the last federal bill, there was more money for testing, but getting testing increased is key for reopening, and we really need an exponential jump in the amount of testing that we have. What are some of the barriers that are there? I mean, I've heard some of it's just even technology, because there's limitations with what we can do with testing. How do you see the testing issue getting resolved over the next several weeks and months?
Well, first, let me make a general point, and I've talked to many of you on this call about it. Too much of our productive capacity for medical equipment and pharmaceutical drugs is abroad. In other words, we depend for 90% of our medical device products, 90% we depend on foreign supply. That's the supply chain. So in a crisis, when there is a supply shortage, we are often on the short end of the stick. There's a basic lack of supply of the reagents, the swabs, as well as the testing equipment that is necessary. And those products are simple, relatively, to make, simple compared to submarines, but still, someone has to make them. And so I have urged, advocated, and cajoled as many of my colleagues, as many of the federal government executives as I can reach, to use the Defense Production Act. The president has that power, and he needs to use it more vigorously. It enables him to place orders that put the federal government at the head of the line and enable the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, to send those supplies where they are needed. And they are needed in Connecticut. We are one of the hot spots in the nation. So more tests depend on enabling the supply chain to work here, more production here in the United States, more allocation to places like Connecticut that really need those tests. And the governor has been a vigorous advocate, as you know. He's told me that the shortage right now is the reagents, the chemical that's used to process and discern whether or not, in fact, the test sample indicates a positive result. So I think it's a national issue, in fact, an international issue. I think we've made the mistake of allowing too much of our supply chain in both medical devices and pharmaceutical drug active ingredients. About 80 to 90% of them are made abroad too, to go overseas. And so we need to bring it back, but in the short term, produce it here and then allocate it to the areas that are most in need. And Connecticut is one of the areas very much in need. And we need to be able to test to go back to work, not just for the diagnostic, but also for the antibodies to determine immunity. And of course, tracing, contact tracing, so we know who has been in contact with people who are infected and test positive. And that's the way to track down and stop the spread of the disease.
Senator, thanks for joining us. Stay on as long as you can. We'll turn to Bill and Dante, and then and we'll open it up again for question and answer. So if you're still on, we can get you on. But whenever you have to jump off, we appreciate you joining us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, especially with Bill and Dante, who are real leaders in this area of workforce development, and I've worked with both of them over many years and had tremendous respect for them. And thank you again for letting me join. Again, 202-641-0523, and look forward to being on a call again soon.
Definitely. Thank you. Bill Villano with Workforce Alliance. Bill, I know one of the things you wanted to talk about was a new program to skill up workers, especially those that are unemployed, to train on some of these skills that may help them, especially in whatever this new economy looks like.
Right. This is a program that the governor just announced yesterday, actually, and it's a program that's going to provide free online learning for the over 460,000 unemployed applicants. Right, Dante, I got the number right? Yeah. So basically, the way this program is going to work, it's a partnership between the Governor's Workforce Council, the Department of Labor, and the 5 workforce boards in the state as the implementing partner and funding partner, using a grant from CHIFA, which, for people who don't know, that's the Connecticut Health and Education Facilities Authority. They've been very gracious in doing this. So fundamentally, what this program is designed to do for those employees who have been furloughed or laid off, it's going to allow them to keep their skills relevant, keep them sharp, keep them up to date. It will also provide for career exploration for those individuals who may not be going back to the job that they had, may decide that maybe waitressing and bartending may not be the most secure job to hold. And it is a very really cost-effective way to offer virtual services to thousands of people receiving unemployment compensation. The program, Metrics Learning, it's called, has excuse me, over 5,000 courses or modules on there, so people can really have a very broad options, a number of options to look at to be able to take courses. We're also, if there's anyone interested, we're looking for employers who might want to go on the Metrics Learning site, take a look around in courses that are in their discipline, and maybe help us be able to guide people on what courses may be most beneficial or what employers may be looking for the most. Just maybe 2 other things, Garrett, if I could mention. One is the state also received a $2.3 million federal grant. Department of Labor applied for that. I hope I'm not taking some of your talk there, Dante, but it's designed to provide temporary employment for individuals who would be involved in disaster recovery type issues, sanitation, sanitizing, things like that, and also humanitarian assistance, which would mean maybe delivery of food, medical supplies, and things. So that was just awarded. We're hoping that the process with the U.S. feds will go quickly, so we can launch that. And then I think I would just lastly say that we're involved in a survey, a regional business survey with 6 chambers, including obviously the Greater New Haven Chamber. And we're trying to look at the industries that were most affected, the magnitude of the layoffs, positions that were laid off. But more importantly, I think we want to get employers' input on foreseeing when they think they'll begin to hire back, what positions, what numbers, so that we'll be ready to help Connecticut get back to work. That's the Reader's Digest version.
No, appreciate it. I'm going to turn to Dante in just 1 minute, but Senator, I had a couple questions come in over email that I'll get you before you have to jump off. What about the Buy American Act and how that could impact some of our biotech companies? that are here, and if that would cause issues for them. And I'll give you the other one too. Questions about liability. A lot of businesses are concerned about, as they open up, if they will have liability for their customers, for their workers, if they were to contract the coronavirus while back at the workplace.
Let me first talk about Buy America. I'd be happy to talk to any of the biotech companies that feel they would be adversely affected. But I think on balance, it should help them to have the manufacturing as well as the development of new vaccines, new therapeutics and treatments, not only for coronavirus, but for all of the kinds of infectious diseases that have arisen, SARS, MERS, H1N1, but also for cancer and the other kinds of diseases that we are on the verge of really making major progress on. And I've visited many of the biotechs in the New Haven area, as a matter of fact, and it's an enormously exciting enterprise. So I'd be happy to talk with them about it. But I think Buy America should help them. And I have supported the Buy America Act. I'm not sure it will be part of this package, though. On the potential liability, you know, I'm hoping that OSHA and other appropriate agencies will issue standards that will protect businesses, simply to clarify any of the questions, any of the uncertainties about what the obligations of businesses are. But for right now, I see that I see no reason for responsible businesses to fear any kind of lawsuits from customers or employees. Businesses in Connecticut have been extremely responsible in the physical distancing rules that they have applied, in the mask wearing and hand washing rules were appropriate, they've instituted. And so in the law, as I'm sure most people on this call know, there is a basic idea of standard of care. If an employer or a manufacturer or a retailer abides by that standard of care, there's really nothing to fear. And I think that, unfortunately, some of the apprehensions have been exaggerated by some of my colleagues who have predicted this flood of lawsuits. I've talked to lawyers around the state of Connecticut. They don't anticipate it, and I don't foresee it either. And if there are frivolous or burdensome litigation, we can deal with it when it comes. We have, by the way, incorporated in the $2.2 trillion package, COVID-3, some reasonable, targeted, limited protections that I think are right now an appropriate response to this potential problem. But I would be glad to listen to anyone on this call, including the person who had the question, about what they are thinking, what they're seeing, and what they're hearing about that potential problem, because we certainly want to address any concerns that they have. Great,
thanks, Senator. Dante, thank you, and definitely a lot of questions about what's going on at the Department of Labor. You know, we've definitely seen, and I think that the turnover has increased on getting through unemployment claims from what we've seen. A lot of questions from employers about even shared work programs right now and how they go through that process.
Well, thank you, Garrett. It really is an honor. Thank you for inviting me to be here. And of course, Bill, always a pleasure to work with you, as we do constantly, sometimes into the wee hours of the evening. And Senator Blumenthal, anytime I can share a stage with you, albeit virtual or otherwise, it is an honor. So it's really nice to be here amongst you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can certainly get to that question. Do you want me to give a bit of an overview first, Garrett?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Okay. So, you know, for us at the Department of Labor, as well as I'm sure most people, there's kind of life before March 13th and life after March 13th, unfortunately. So since the 13th, which is the day that we're marking a lot of this, we have, well, first I'll tell you, we typically in a given week get about 2,500 to 3,000 applications for unemployment. And in our peak season between Thanksgiving into February, we get about 9,000, 10,000 max. We now have well over 3 years of applications in 7 weeks. So we've had 471,000 plus applications since March 13th. And we are actually pretty pleased to say that 411,000 of those have been or are in processing. Now, it doesn't equate to money in hand for people, and I will have to say that not every application is eligible for unemployment benefits just based on law. But the processing also requires very often a manual determination along the way. They are not cookie cutter applications. They're very, very individualized. So as I said, we've gotten well over 3 years in just the 7 weeks. We typically issue about $15 million per week in benefits for state benefits. We have thus far issued $425 million in state benefits in those 7 weeks. And then now we're adding to it that which Senator Blumenthal and the rest of the delegation has been able to bring to relief for Connecticut residents. Of the first of the federal programs that we were able to institute is the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. The acronym we go with is FPUC. So the FPUC is the $600 stimulus that is added to a payment. We have started on April 24th. We had to build an entirely new kind of pathway or avenue within our system to be able to issue these additional payments. So starting April 24th, we began issuing the weekly edition of the 600. And then this past weekend, we hit another milestone and we were able to issue the retroactive payments for those who were eligible back the 3 weeks to March 29th when that began. So we did 560,000 retroactive payments this last weekend, another 336 million. So we are moving along, although for those who are still waiting, that doesn't mean all that much to them. They're still struggling and they're still waiting. So, you know, until everyone has their safety net, if you will, everyone who is eligible, we're not resting, we're not waiting here. We are, many of us going on day 53 straight without a day off. So please be assured that although there are challenges that we're finding and addressing, no one at Department of Labor is resting until everyone has what they need to get through this really difficult time. There's a couple things that will make it easier. If you are able to select your payment in method as being direct deposit, you can actually go back in on filectui.com to the green button if you haven't done this and you want to change it. But a direct deposit to a savings account or a checking account is by far the fastest way to receive your benefit. We do know that the banks are challenged right now, and even the companies who make the plastic for the cards, for the debit cards, are challenged, as well as the Postal Service. So it is an additional, 10 days to a couple weeks sometimes for people added onto what we're doing if they have, if they've selected that debit card. So anytime they can do direct deposit, savings or checking is a benefit. There are also some really important things that they should look at on the CTDOL website front page. Please go to the very large rectangular red box that is our FAQs. We are changing these daily, and we're doing that by listening to the questions that are coming into us and addressing them within the FAQs. And we now have a table of contents. So it's organized whether you're filing, whether you're an employer, whether it's about the federal benefits, it's all right there on those FAQs. So that's a tremendous resource for people. In addition, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that we do not have a call center, and that is true. And in some ways that's unfortunate, but that dates back to when we did have a call center prior to 2015. We had about 130 people working in that call center. One of the challenges at the time although it was state of the art, was that we were available, those 130 people available to answer calls just Monday through Friday, 7 to 4:30 or so. At the time, about 2015, we encountered some massive layoffs in the state, as everyone else did. And due to layoffs, and then in 2016 and forward, attrition and retirements, we went from the 130 people down to about 40 people after the layoffs, down to about 5 people answering those phones. Our agency has 35% less people now than we did in 2015. And unfortunately, in UI and IT, we're about 60% less staff than we had during those times. But what we did was we were really, I think, forward thinking at that time, and we established online access. And that online access is 24/7, 365. So we set up filectui.com, and we actually had more access for people. And in addition, in our American Job Centers, Bill has one of the regions there, and he's got the American Job Centers as well. We put people into there for in-person access to helping people with their UI. So we went from a call center down to very limited hours of access to 24/7, 365 online, in person, 18 locations throughout the state. And quite frankly, we had a 3-day turnaround, and we had very positive feedback about our customer service. And then March 13th, forward to March 18th, where the state had to close all of our offices to the public. So that's where we got to the point of having challenges with limited access. We've opened up phone lines for general information to talk people through, and we are working with people like yourselves that are forwarding us the more detailed questions, concerns, whatever, and we're trying to address them. But we are getting down on that backlog, and we're working through this as quickly as we can, and we're innovating as we go. So we do appreciate the patience. Our staff are dealing with the same COVID-related illnesses and family illnesses as everyone else, but we're not going to rest until we get through this. You're muted, Garrett.
Thanks for the overview. And we did have a couple questions about shared work. Can you just explain that program a little bit to everyone?
Sure. The shared work program is in some ways phenomenal, because what we're able to do is to prevent some employers from having to close their doors if they're having difficulty meeting their payroll. So they are able to reduce about anywhere from 10 to 60% of what they're paying, and then the unemployment, it can cover them for a period of time for that reduction, so that the employees are able to maintain their jobs, the employer is able to get back to a point where they can go 100%. One of the challenges is that we now do, as with everything else, we do have a backlog on that. The shared work program is very manual. There's a lot of touching of paper by people here. We've taken staff from other units and put them into the shared work to try to move that forward. But if employers are able to kind of hang on and get through that, the program itself is incredibly beneficial.
And what kind of timeline are you seeing right now? I mean, can employers get word that they're in and then start the program, or do they have to wait for a lengthy paperwork process?
Well, what they have to do, and during any time, is the employer has to work with us on developing an individualized plan. So it's not just it's not just go into the portal, sign up, and it's done. We have to establish a plan with them, and that's very individual. So there is a few weeks typically to be able to get off the ground with that. But we are working as quickly as we can. But it's really individualized, and that's a benefit to them as well, even though it takes a bit of a delay.
How about there was some concern with the Paycheck Protection Program, since that does have employers bring their employees back to work. Is there any logistical issue with people coming off of unemployment and then getting back into their jobs? And I'm not asking the same question we asked the senator before, but just how that transition occurs from them being on the unemployment rolls to actually being back at their employer. Is there anything anyone should be concerned about as they do that with their employees?
I'm going to say no. Again, every single case is so individualized, but and we're hearing that employers are using the PPP in different ways for different amounts. So some people are coming back for, 75% of the time. They're not coming back. They're not taking them back full time or whatever. Unemployment does allow for partial. It is for underemployment and unemployment. So it is something that we are working through. I will actually, if you don't mind, add to what the senator had said. Everything he said about the rights of the employer is absolutely correct. An employee may not receive unemployment benefit just because they want to and they don't want to go back to work. The employer does have the ability to protest that. So there's a couple different forms that that employers are familiar with when an employee signs up for unemployment. There's a UC 280, which is a notice of potential liability that comes to them from the merit rating unit. They have an opportunity on that form, as well as the 54Q, which is the notice of weekly charges. Both of those forms are generated from Department of Labor and they go to employers. On both of those forms, they have an opportunity to appeal or protest an employee not coming back. They also can just send an email to the merit rating unit and let us know. By the same token, there are times where an employee has a legitimate reason for not going back. And if they, for instance, one example, if they're immunocompromised themselves or they're taking care of someone, a child or an elder person who is immunocompromised, and they simply cannot go back into an environment that they feel will be safe, they have a right to due process as well. So the protest by the employer generates an appeal process, and the employee, especially for PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Act, the federal program, PUA is for people who are deemed ineligible for state unemployment benefits, but also they have to be able and available to work unless they fit the bill of some of these pandemic conditions. So if they have a health risk, if they can't go in, they have an opportunity to receive the federal stimulus for the PUA. So again, not a cookie cutter, but there's an opportunity for both the employer and the employee to have due process, and the employee with genuine medical concerns, needs, and risk may have the opportunity for the PUA unemployment.
I think that's really helpful to kind of understand the process there. We had a question in the chat. Under the shared work program, will employees, if they're part of the shared work program, still receive the extra $600 from the federal government? Is that prorated, or they get that in full?
Yes, the way that it's come to us from the federal government, the 600 is not ever prorated. So it is available to be added on to someone's regular state unemployment benefit in full, even if they're part of the shared work. The one thing I will say is that this weekend, as we were doing the retroactive payments, the shared work population was not part of that because it's a separate pathway, if you will. And this week, we're going to be getting the retro out to those who are part of the shared work. However, they have been since the 24th, they should be, have been getting on their weekly attached that additional 600. It's just the retro on the shared work population is a little bit delayed.
Gotcha, okay. And should the employer report to the DOL when the employee is rehired? Is that on the employer or on the employee?
That's on the employee, and they really should right away, because otherwise they set themselves up for a situation where they're getting paid and they're not eligible any longer, and then they have to go through a repayment process, and they do risk the designation of fraud, because if they knowingly, every week they have to go in and file. So if they've been brought back to work and they go in at that Sunday and they hit the green button and they refile, technically that's fraud. So they don't want that kind of a label, because then if ever they're unemployed in the future, that sticks with them.
Any way to get retroactive unemployment if someone didn't file early? That was a question here in the chat.
So there's a case-to-case basis if they wanted to appeal. Typically, the state unemployment is back to the date of the week of filing. But again, because of the COVID and some of the federal stuff, it does get a little bit more complicated. So for instance, if they're part of the PUA population, the federal benefit, that's retroactive back to February 2nd. It does require, though, answering of a question about how and when you were deemed affected by COVID negatively in your employment, and you do have to attest to that. So that particular program goes back to February 2nd. We are also, though, we're aware of when someone files, and if it's on our end because they filed but been part of the backlog, we will make them whole for that retroactive period. And
right now too, because of the federal program, self-employed people are eligible for unemployment. Is that our understanding of it?
So the way that the PUA works, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, is that you have to first be deemed ineligible for state benefit, and then you can apply for the PUA, which typically, traditionally, not 100%, but most self-employed are ineligible for state benefit. They're not paying into the unemployment insurance. It's just like a car insurance program, and people sometimes have a hard time understanding this. You have to pay your premiums, and then if you're in an accident, you get your car insurance to cover you. So unemployment is paid for by employers, by covered taxable employers that are paying into a trust fund. And then if their employees are unemployed because something happens within the business, they can apply for unemployment. So you have to apply, be deemed and found ineligible before you can apply for the PUA. Now, that most self-employed will have zero wages, so we don't have their wage records at all here. They have them when they file with DRS or IRS for their taxes, but we don't have that. So if we get somebody who's a no wage record, there's zero wages, they will get what's called a UC-58, a monetary determination, and it will come back saying you're ineligible for state benefit because you have no monetary determination. At that point in time, so that's step one for anybody unemployed, step one. Step one, we opened up officially last Thursday and said, if you're self-employed, thank you for not having applied earlier to the state because you didn't impact our growing backlog. Thank you. Now we're welcoming you. Come to File CTUI, click on the blue button, file for your state eligibility. We expect that you will then be deemed ineligible. Once that happens, it'll come through the mail. You'll get this monetary determination. And then we go on to step two. Step two, we are expecting, we've been saying midweek, which I say is Wednesday, maybe Thursday. We're hoping to hit that target for step two. That will mean go back on File CTUI. We will have a red button, which will be the gateway to apply for PUA. That red button, I'm crossing my fingers and my toes, will be up within, sometime within the next 48 hours so that we can have hit our target. They then will apply to that. Now, a challenge, and we're fond of challenges here, a challenge is that we at DOL don't have their wages. So what we're asking for is their by federal government, it has to be 2019 taxes. If they filed their taxes and they have proof of their 2019 tax returns, that's the information that we'll be looking at. Many, many, many people have taken advantage of the opportunity that's presented to them for an extension, and they have yet to do that. And that's okay. But what we need to do, though, is they'll need to still have the information that they would for their filing, and it's going to go through an audit process. So that equates to time. One, are getting proof of their taxes. Two, if they don't have them done, the documentation that we then have an audit. Because of that, what we're going to be doing is the fastest way we can get this going, and we do know that other states, for instance, Massachusetts is doing it this way. We can deem them eligible, and they will be getting what is the minimum PUA allocation, the 198 per week, and on top of that, dependencies. On top of that, the 600, the FPUC. They'll start off with that, and then as we proceed through the verification process, if it's deemed that they were owed more than that, that will be done retroactively. So we'll get them going, and I will indicate that's an amount that's higher than the typical state. State UI benefits range from $15 a week to $649. With dependencies, it can go up to $724 if you have 5 children. This brings them even higher than that because of the FPUC. So they'll get the 198, they'll get the dependents at $15 per dependent up to 5, and they'll get the additional 600. We'll start them with that, and we'll make them whole after verification.
Great. Well, we're getting close to the end of the hour, so I'll turn to each of our panelists just to kind of wrap up here. So, Senator, we'll start with you.
Yeah, let me just first of all say about Dante and about the Department of Labor, I hope you have some sense from her description of what they have done about the magnitude and scale of this challenge. She says that they're fond of challenges. I'm so glad that is so, because this task has been such an enormous challenge. And I will tell you, without any false modesty on my part, we were very proud of the fact that we increased this unemployment insurance to $600 per week on top of what people receive already for 4 months, because it really puts money into the hands of struggling families and workers. But the task of administering this program is gargantuan, and Connecticut has really been at the forefront. I think we should be very proud of the commissioner, of Dante, of what our state government has done, and it's been a model of success. I know we tend not to appreciate our state employees. I'm a former state employee as Attorney General, proud of that fact, but in this instance, they really came through for us. And it emphasizes, number two, the importance of the point I made earlier. State and local governments need more assistance. We have provided some administrative aid through this unemployment insurance enhancement. But as you can tell from her description of the diminished numbers of IT people and of others in her very department, state government needs that assistance. But the other point I want to make is really to come back to Bill. We have an enormous challenge, both a challenge and an opportunity going forward in this new era, because as much as we are seeing unemployment, we're also going to see a need for more skilled workers. Trust me, I'm a member of the Armed Services Committee. The contracts for Electric Boat to build submarines, for Pratt & Whitney to build F-35 engines, for Sikorsky to build new helicopters, those defense contractors are coming our way. We can't let down our national defense just because of a pandemic. Believe me, the Russians and the Chinese are in no way letting down their efforts to build. And so it affects our entire supply chain, our entire economy needs those skills, whether it's the engineers or designers or the welders and the pipe fitters and others whose skills are essential. So we need to keep our eye on the ball in terms of skill training. And finally, oversight. We're talking about right now, $3 trillion in government spending that will be done over the next 2, 3, 6 months. And we're going to add to it. $3 trillion is the federal budget and then another half. So we're going to have over the next 6 months, probably 2 federal budgets spent, and we need stronger oversight. The Inspector General who will stand up to waste, fraud, favoritism, protection for whistleblowers who know of wrongdoing, taxpayer dollars are at stake here. We're adding to our national debt. We need to be mindful about fiscal responsibility here and preventing waste, fraud, and favoritism. In short, stronger oversight. So that's part of what I'm going to be doing. I've led an effort. I'm leading this effort with a number of my colleagues here in Washington. As a former Attorney General, I have some experience in law enforcement, and both at the state and the federal level, we need to safeguard taxpayer dollars. So again, thanks, Garrett, for giving me this opportunity to be with you, and hope you'll call, contact my office if you have issues, questions such have been raised on this call, and thanks to Dante and Bill for doing such important work.
Great, thanks, Senator. Appreciate it. Bill?
Yeah, I just want to say, Senator, you know, we are eager to, we have a manufacturing pipeline program that are feeding not only Electric Boat, the companies you mentioned, but also the supply chain. So, and hopefully that's going to start back up August 1. So we're looking forward to that. The two quick things I just wanted to say, Garrett, is that our business services, our business services unit is still working with employers in the region. We're referring qualified candidates. We're writing on-the-job training contracts for those people who need some additional training. We're working with essential employers, such as the manufacturers that the Senator mentioned, healthcare entities like Yale New Haven, Gaylord, Masonacare, and the grocery chains and the drugstores, some of the frontline people. And in lieu of being able to do the hiring events that we have been working on, in June, we're going to begin a series of online kind of virtual webinars for employers that can talk about their companies, their hiring needs, their application process, and things like that. So, you know, like everyone else, we're moving a lot of our services to the virtual world, but the person on the screen, Wanda Lowry, is our business services coordinator, and you see her contact information. So if there's anybody who is interested in hiring or participating in those webinars or any other of our business services, she's the one to contact. Thank you, Garrett.
Great, thanks, Bill. And Dante?
Well, first, Garrett, again, thank you. This has been really tremendous. I appreciate this. Senator Blumenthal, thank you for all the kind words. It's very nice of you to do. I want to just say that we have an amazing, amazing team here at Department of Labor. Commissioner Kurt Westby and my partner deputy, Daryl Dudinsky, they're tremendous. And I will tell you, as I said before, working around the clock. Last night at 9:30 at night, the three of us were having a conference call about today. So they are just so supportive and hands-on, very hands-on. Not all commissioners are hands-on, but I tell you they are. And we're really fortunate because Daryl used to be the UI director here. So, you know, this is his area of specialty. I've got about 7 weeks under my belt of learning this, but he's busy making technical changes at the moment and steering our team forward. So I just want to give a shout out to them. The staff and the directors have been so innovative and creative and are really, really brilliant in their areas of expertise that we've been really building this plane as we fly it. So, you know, these programs, the PUA program for unemployed, no state has that because they're not typically covered. So, you know, as we get guidance and we build and we develop and we try to implement, and that's on a 40-year-old COBOL system, which was supposed to be retired. Had we made it one more year before this pandemic hit, it was supposed to be retired with a new system in May of 2021. So, you know, so we're working and going, and I appreciate Senator Blumenthal acknowledging some of the challenges that we have. I will say some really important things for people who are in the position of waiting for their benefits. Debit card. Debit card is one of the fastest ways you can make this work for you. If you have not, excuse me, I just said the absolute wrong thing. Debit card is the slowest way. The direct deposit, I apologize, I wish we could scratch that and edit that. The direct deposit into your savings or into your checking. So if in fact you didn't select direct deposit, you default to a debit. If you've selected debit, go back and do direct deposit. You go on to File CTUI, click the green button, change your method of payment, savings or checking, direct deposit. It will save you probably a couple of weeks. So please do that. And go on to the front page of the CTDOL website, look for the big red rectangle FAQs, frequently asked questions. Most of what people are asking, except for their individual case, can be found there. So thank you so much for the opportunity to connect with your constituency.
Great. Thank you again to all of you. Thank you to everyone who joined us this morning, and to AMS Recruiters, our sponsor for today's webinar. We're doing another one on Thursday morning. We're going to be talking about the reopen and what your businesses need to know to be prepared for May 20th and beyond. Thanks again to all of our panelists and everyone who joined. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Garrett.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Senator.
Garrett.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.
You too. Be well.
Thanks.